Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the original The Conjuring. The Conjuring 2013. Really, a lot of people might realize that there is a Conjuring universe where it seems like they try to tie a bunch of these movies together. Like it seems like the Conjuring is also tied to Annabelle and is also tied to The Nun and some other wild movie. But yeah, it seems like they're all synced in with one another, I guess, so that way they can try to make movie buys out of other things. When I guess you're searching through a number of, like, oh, hey, I want to check out The Conjuring. Oh, wait a minute. There's 8 other movies that I could probably watch and I probably won't enjoy. Not saying that The Conjuring was one of those. I actually went in here and actually did enjoy a part of this movie, but not the whole entire thing. Really, I could say a lot about this movie kind of feels a copy and paste moment of a lot of the paranormal activity, kind of those like poltergeist style of movies where really it just kind of feels like it's all the same kind of thing. They're trying to consistently keep bringing these kinds of movies out there to try to get people to go and see them. But there was something that I thought was fresh and I thought was new, and there was something that I was like, oh, okay, man, at first like this movie was boring, but then eventually we got further into this and I'm like, wait a minute, like there's something interesting at least about this, but not the whole film. Really, when we get to both Ed and Lorraine, who are to go into this class and talk about the 3 stages of getting to a point of needing a exorcism because something is going horribly awry in your home, like we have infestation, we have oppression, and then we have possession. And really, like when they were to mention all these, I was like, okay, I'm hooked. Like, all right. Like I like the fact that they did so much investigation of the paranormal activities that are to go on here. I liked the whole like them recording the family, and I liked the just investigations that they were trying to do with the doors and the bells and stuff like that. I liked and enjoyed that. But also, like, I understand that this is a true or based on true story. So, like, I could really understand that, hey, like, I'm sure a lot of people could enjoy this movie because it's wow, like this was a true story? Wow. Here's also the thing. I do actually enjoy when they are actually doing the investigation and figuring out what is going on with this house. It kind of breaks down to me like a 1408 kind of situation, where like in the 1408 movie, Samuel Jackson is to give John Cusack this huge uh, like report of every single death that has happened in 1408, and like this huge like yellow envelopey thing of like the number of deaths that have happened in that room. And and that kind of breaks down like this does, and I'm like, oh, okay, so like they're kind of gearing us up for eventually when we are to actually see these ghosts appear. And like I enjoyed that. I liked the backstory that we have to get into this home, not just the eventual ramp up of like, oh, like we don't know what the heck is going on, but I guess we just have to fight these ghosts. Like at least they did some kind of background, because a lot of times in a lot of movies they just go in here and they just kind of throw caution in the wind and just like, dude, we've done this numerous times before, and let's just go in here and just power of Christ compels you. And like I've seen The Exorcist twice now, and reasonably, like there is like some kind of moments here and there that kind of feel like The Exorcist in this movie, but like at least this movie seems a little bit more like like I can get into this a little bit more than I probably could the Exorcist movie, because that movie is just kind of like everybody is trying to copy and paste the Exorcist, and eventually just over time like some movie has to just get better. And so eventually I will probably have the Exorcist review up, and because eventually like I had reviewed that again, and I'm going to eventually put it out there, but it's not out there now until eventually I will release it. So probably around the time that I put this out. So no, probably not. Anyways, so teeing this movie up. So what is to happen is a family Amityville horror style is to go into a home, and eventually there is some leg grabbing and there is some sleepwalking, and that is to lead to eventually having kids getting scared, mentioning that they are seeing things. It seems like this family is to play some game, which I'll get into in spoilers, and eventually the ghosts are to play along with this game. So, but eventually, like things start bumping into the night, and so Roger, the family father, is to go and have to just call upon eventually Ed and Lorraine, who are in the very beginning of this movie going and doing an investigation on the Annabelle doll, and then eventually going into this new case, which is trying to figure out how they can exorcise this home to eventually help this family. And also, it seems like we get some backstory of Lorraine in this movie, which I actually do enjoy. But yeah, so with that said, I know there's like an MCU kind of style, a Conjuring universe to this whole thing. And so maybe everyone's going to watch every single one of these movies regardless. I didn't enjoy Annabelle, so reasonably, I think Annabelle Comes Home like comes after this, and like there's some kind of order. I think Google will tell you like exactly through images what exact movies you should be watching in certain orders, which is perfectly fine. I don't know how exactly if any of these are all connected to one another. I didn't go and watch Annabelle's Creation. Some of these movies are rough. So, with that said, I'm going to go into spoilers about this movie. So let's go into the coveted spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So yeah, very beginning of this movie was just kind of rough on me. Just because like I was like, oh my god, is this gonna be like Annabelle, where I'm just gonna get bored to death? But no, like eventually, like it's slow going, but then eventually I'm like, oh, okay, like I can see why people could like this film. So let's go into it. So, very beginning of this movie, uh, we have both Ed and Lorraine who are talking to some girls who had gotten the Annabelle doll. It seemed like some doll had decided to be possessed by someone, and so these girls have obtained this doll. And what ends up happening is they have this doll who is to play ding dong ditch with these people. And so we have the girls who are just kind of checking at these doors, and eventually this Annabelle is to show up at a number of these doors for these women, but no one is to die. Like this Annabelle is just repetitiously showing up in several different doors, playing ding dong ditch with these people, like knocking on the door, and they're going, oh, hello, and then eventually they are to realize that the Annabelle is popping up in certain kind of doors and they don't understand what's going on. So these girls just hand this doll over to Ed and Lorraine, just like, here you go. Go ahead and take this thing. I don't want it in my life anymore. And so Ed is to mention that like the Annabelle doll is not to be actually like trying to possess this doll. It's just a vessel for it to get to somewhere else. Kind of like how in Child's Play we have Chucky in the very first movie who desperately needs to actually go back into an actual body because his doll body is eventually wearing out, and eventually Chucky needs to go back into the very first person that had like bought Chucky, had gotten Chucky. And so Chucky needs to go back into the boy that he had been terrifying and horrifying and whatever. Luckily, he didn't kill him right away, because man, would have sucked. So pushing on. So Ed is to now have this doll and is to have this whole room filled of possessed items, to where this reporter wants to go and check out this whole entire room, and Ed is consistently telling this reporter not to touch anything. Do not touch a single thing. None of these things are actually toys. Even the toy monkey that is to have a little chimey thing, that's not a toy. These are all possessed items. Do not touch them, because I'm sure any one of these things would just love to just like cling itself onto you and haunt you for the rest of your days. So, like, I'm saying that, but that's not exactly what Ed says. So, this reporter is to ask about Ed, like, hey, do you have the Annabelle doll? And so Ed is to have the Annabelle doll in this special case, because I guess if you put this doll in this special case, then it won't start roaming around, I guess. But eventually, later on in this movie, we are to eventually see a ghost in a wheelchair that is to be playing with the Annabelle doll, weirdly enough, while like also to be like trying to scare Ed and Lorraine's daughter, which she's very rarely in this movie, even though, like, I guess I should realize what her name is, but, like, we'll just call her, like, Daughter Warren, or Ed and Lorraine's daughter for most of this movie. I think her name is Judy, but there's going to be a lot of names I'm probably not going to know. So, let's eschew into the Roger and Carol stuff. So, we have both Roger and Carol who are to be moving into this new home out of the country, and it seems like they are right by this little this little lake or little pond or whatever. And so this just reminded me heavily of Amityville Horror. I'm like, oh my god, when is it going to be that like Ryan Reynolds is going to come in here and kill this whole entire family? Or in the original movie, I think it was like a Brolin that like killed the whole family, and I was just expecting that to happen somewhere in this film, because it just gave me flashbacks about Amityville Horror for some reason. So, going into this, like, really, Roger or Carol is just start bizarrely having like bruises on her body, and when Carol and Roger are to move into this house, like, they go and christen, meaning they do the horizontal mambo. And so the very next morning, Carol is to have a bruise on her body, and Roger and Carol like, did I do that? Like, did we do that while doing the horizontal mambo? And Carol's like, I don't know. But eventually Carol starts to more and more start to have bruises on her bate. So, like, I'm going to try to, in a roundabout way, there's a lot of crap that happens in this home. So, if anything, there might be certain things that I don't get to, because there's just a ton of stuff that happens in this home. So, in the very early on, it seems like the dog of this house does not want to go into this house. Sadly enough, we all of a sudden, absurdly, see eventually this dog die off to the side of this house for reasons I don't understand. Eventually, all of a sudden, there are birds that keep smacking into this house and dying for weird reasons. which is awful. But so if you're a dog or a bird lover, I'm sorry, but it happens in this movie. Can't help it. I don't know what it is with a number of horror films that they have to kill animals in movies. I don't get that at all. Like, some movies do it in a very horrific way, and some movies do it in just like I can take that kind of animal murder, but like I don't want to see it in my films. But anyways, because some stuff is downright awful. So, anyways, pushing on. So going going through this house. So really, it just at first comes down to one of the girls who I believe is Christine, because there's so many freaking girls and daughters and whatever that live in this house. So you might get names confused, and also any number of these times things happen while people are asleep, and plus also like these girls are very much older than what they were in original film. Like, if I would have just reviewed this as this was going on, then I would be a much younger YouTuber. So anyways, going into this, so Christine is to consistently smell farts in her room. It seems like there's this delicious fart smell that is to consistently go through the aroma of this room. Like, somebody just is nonstop just in this room. And so Christine just can't handle the smell. So, but also Christine is getting her leg grabbed and pulled. Like, I'm not trying to make jokes here about anything that's going on, but I also need to try to like make this thing kind of much more exciting than maybe it actually is. So Christine is to complain about her uh, sister that she is to, I think, Nancy, who she is like consistently bunking with in her room, and like consistently getting onto her about pulling her leg. And Nancy's like, I didn't do anything. Like, I'm sleeping. Like, shut up. So, shut up, I'm sleeping. Let me go and pull your leg later when I give you a joke. Ba-dum. Anyways, so, uh, so eventually this leads to also one of the girls who was consistently sleepwalking. She keeps smacking into this, like, I want to call it like a wardrobe like thing. It's not a closet, but it's like a wardrobe like thing where, like, if you are to open it up, it looks like a closet, but it's like a wardrobe like furniture piece. And so this girl keeps smacking into this thing to where eventually Roger is to have to wake up to try to get his daughter wrangled back into her bed. So here's the very beginning of this whole house thing. So these kids are to have this like hide and seek like game, but what is going on is they are to blindfold all of these people. Whoever is the person that is it has to be blindfolded, and so everyone else is just going to hide throughout the house, and they have to do 3 claps to have somebody figure out where they are. Which I actually think this game is actually cool. Like, it's actually fun. And I actually think it's way better than doing like a hide and seek where you have to turn off every single one of your lights. And so these girls are doing this while like this house is like brand new to them. So like their mother is just like, I don't think you guys should be playing this game because you're not very familiar with this house just yet. And plus, also, they're kind of moving a bunch of things, and so, like, anybody will trip and fall on a number of things just because they're getting this house ready. So, but one of the girls is to eventually start kind of looking for one of the girls, and so, uh, the girl who is to find one of the girls in this, like, in this closet underneath the staircase. And so the girl who ends up getting caught eventually is to like smack her elbow, I think, into one of the pieces of wood. And so they're like, whoops. And so Roger is like, whoops, what? Like, what did you guys do? And so Roger is to go and investigate what the heck that they did. And so Roger is to start pulling pieces and just be like, oh, well, this sucks. But then eventually he's like, oh, wait. This is like a basement. Like, we have a basement now, I guess. Because he starts pulling out these wood pieces to find out there's some basement with all these pieces in there. He's like, oh, great. Like, hey, there's like a piano down here. There's all these bizarrish pieces. I don't know how all these things got down here, but hey, I guess they're down here now. Like, I don't know how they're going to get them all out, but still, like, when eventually they're going to try and like get these things like out of here, I guess, to maybe try to sell them or something. But like, but Roger is just like looking at all this stuff and he's like, how did all this stuff get down here? Like, they must have built this like house around this stuff, because that's just what it seems like. But anyways, so Roger keeps heading down into this attic to just kind of like see all these pieces and see if maybe they could sell something to make some money off of this home that they just bought. So anyways, Roger is consistently going down to this attic to like clean stuff up, to just be like, hey, maybe we can use this for storage or whatever. But yeah, that's just like, eventually I think this attic also starts to awaken things. But anyways, so consistently these kids are sleeping, and consistently the girl is complaining about somebody pulling her leg, to eventually when she is to waken up and she is to think that she is to see somebody behind this door, to where Nancy, I believe it's Nancy, is to wake up and like try to see if she can see anything at this door. And and Christine is mentioning like, there's someone right behind you, Nancy. And she's like, I don't see anything. And all of a sudden this door slams really hard, and all the girls are like freaking out. And so the parents have to rush into these girls' bedroom yet again, just be like, God, like, this is just never gonna end. And so both Roger and Carol are comforting Christine and like seeing what happened. And Christine is to mention someone was in here. And so the more that these stories continue to happen, like really just like Roger and Carolyn or uh Carolyn are just like thinking like, are these just kids goofing around, or are they really telling us the truth? Like, because really we have like Ed and Lorraine, who are to go through other homes and start to like disprove what people were hearing. That eventually they're like, hey, like, what you were hearing was the little clatter that you were consistently hearing in this home. It's just this part of this home that's old, and like the noises that you were exactly hearing was this piece of wood, that it's just weaker than some other things, and that's the consistent noise you heard. And they're like, well, I guess this house isn't haunted after all. And so Ed and Lorraine is like, well, yeah, like, that sucks that we couldn't find anything, but thanks for that big fat check. Sadly enough. But anyways, so Ed and Lorraine are to eventually have well, Ed is kind of wanting to go on his own to try and go on to a case that he heard from a preacher about Carol and Roger's home. And so Lorraine is like, well, like, you know what, like, because Ed just mentions that he's going to like the grocery store or something, and Lorraine is like, why are you lying? Like, I know you're lying to me. And so Ed is like, yeah, I have another case. And Lorraine is like, okay, well, I'm going with you. And Ed is like, no. Like, if anything, like, I think you've done enough. because Lorraine has like Ed mentions this in this movie that Lorraine has kind of like done too many of these cases. Like it gets to the point where Lorraine has had too many of these things like take a good chunk out of her, uh, to where Ed just wants to consistently have Lorraine not be a part of things. So Ed could have Lorraine in his life a lot longer and not have to like whittle her down through every one of these cases, because eventually Lorraine had went on to these one of these cases that had really took a big chunk out of her, to where she had to go into a room and just stay there for 8 days, not eat or whatever or anything, and to just kind of like even out because of the horrors that she had seen through somebody that they tried to exorcise. So, because what ends up happening is is that eventually Lorraine and Ed uh, are to go to this school, and Carol is to try to introduce herself to both Ed and Lorraine and mention about her case. And because both Lorraine and Ed are to mention about the 3 stages, about quite possibly that people might need Ed and Lorraine's help. And so Carol is to meet them at this at this school thing, and Carol is to mention like, yeah, I might have a case for you guys, like if you would like to come to my home. And so Ed and Lorraine is like, okay, sure, like let's see what this is. So both Ed and Lorraine is to come there, and so Lorraine is to consistently feel this like dark energy throughout this home. Like you can start to see like she's kind of like hunching over in some parts. She's kind of just feeling things out. Lorraine is to because what ends up happening is like to where it escalates this so much. Carol is to eventually play hide and seek with her daughter, and eventually like all like the photos on the wall had all fallen down and all had broken, and eventually Carol was to go down by the attic and to play this clapping game, and eventually there is some spirit that is to clap and scare the crap out of Carol, and she couldn't get out of her out of the room that she was in. And like so they're just like, okay, like this is enough. Like this is more than enough. Like we like these kids are getting terrified. Like it's getting to the point where everybody is just kind of sleeping in the living room like together, because like we just can't take going anywhere else in the house. There's certain smells and all kinds of things, and one of the kids had seen this toy that is to be this like almost like Jack in the Box ish like thing, where this like clown keeps going up and down, and like the mirror inside of it keeps like turning and spinning, and supposedly you're supposed to see some person, this ghost that is to appear. And we have Lorraine consistently using this toy to see if she can see something, and eventually she is to see spirits that are to appear to her at some points in this film. But anyways, Ed is to make his way like out to this like outside, and eventually Lorraine is to eventually spot there is a girl that it's hanging on this tree, and like Ed is like right there as she's hanging, and Ed is like, what? And Lorraine is like, dude, there's a girl hanging right there. And Ed is like, okay, all right. All right, okay, like I guess like we've heard enough is enough. And so Ed also goes and records the parents and like hears their stories. But here's the goofy thing: Ed is to replay back this whole thing, and it seems like the recording just takes out certain voices, and all of a sudden there's these like goofy voices that are to appear instead of theirs. And so both Lorraine and Ed are also starting to see this ghost appearing in their home technically, because all of a sudden their clocks are to stop at 3:07, like the other home's clocks stop at 3:07. And so, because what Ed says is that this ghost is to stick to these people like a piece of gum. And so there's no way for them to just leave this home and this ghost not like come with them wherever they're going to go. So these people need to stay in this home to like try to get rid of this ghost. So what eventually ends up happening is Carolyn continues to get all these bruises all over her body. And so Ed and Lorraine are to just be like, dude, we have like a stacked chalk block full of like evidence, because what ends up happening is Lorraine and Ed are now like staying with Lorraine, Ed, and Drew, Thomas, and Brad. Brad, I guess, is like a police officer, and Drew is just this guy who has this like kind of like UV lights and cameraman and stuff like that. And so Brad is kind of to go in there and be a skeptic, and Drew is to come with Brad to just be like, dude, like you can't just go in there and shoot anything. Like, I'm just letting you aware of that now. And Brad is like, yeah, I get that. Like, I get that I'm just going to come in here and have to, like, come in here with, like, an open mind. So, if anything, like, so we start putting these bells in these doors, and at first, like, this thing, like, doesn't want to show itself right away. Brad is to go into one room and use the bathroom because he had to go, and everybody was thinking that it was some like ghostly thing, but it was no, it was Brad just needed to go to the bathroom. So eventually they are to start hearing things into the attic, so they are in the basement, I mean, and so they start to go down there, and they start to have like a microphone, and they're trying to record things, and Lorraine is starting to feel vibes of something dark down here, but nothing is to really show itself, so they decide to go all the way back up, and so all of a sudden the attic door is to slam, and we really have it to where like Brad is kind of skeptical, and he's like, "Oh, that might have just been the like a good breeze to like close that door." Like, I'm not sold yet, but eventually he will get sold when eventually a maid is gonna freaking come at him, like scaring the out of him. Because oh my god, like that maid moment where Brad, like I can see where Brad got freaked out, because like there's this one spot where Brad is to like see a rocking chair rock by itself, and so he goes out to check anything that's out there, and then eventually he is to see in some room a maid who is to mention like they made me do it, or she made me do it, or somebody made me do it. And so Brad goes in the room to investigate, to talk to this girl, to see that this maid had slit her wrists, because eventually there is some investigation about some maid who had offed herself, some woman that had hung herself, and some mother and I think son who had went into this house, and I think the mother killed the son, I think, and then I think probably killed herself, something along those lines. But there had been a couple cases of previous owners of this place that had gone and killed themselves one way or another. So eventually Brad is to meet this maid with blood coming from her wrists. And then like so Brad is like looking for this maid because she had vanished, and then all of a sudden this maid appears to Brad like right in his face, and then Brad just freaks out and then just like jumps back, and he's like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, I could see where that could be like scary to people. Like, because there's some in your face scary parts in this movie. Because so here's the thing. So, because I'm kind of like in a roundabout way, like talking every part and bit and piece of this movie. Like, I'm not going to do it in the exact same way that this movie was done. So, if you haven't checked out this movie, do so and come back. Because I'm going to do this in a roundabout way because that's how I would rather do it. So, and that moment might have freaked you out, and I could completely understand that. So pushing on. So they are to go back after they head out of this attic. The whole entire group, Lorraine and Ed, after this whole attic situation, the door has closed, and so all of a sudden they are to eventually have, of course, the one girl that is a sleepwalker that is to start walking up this stairs. And so, really, at first, like, Roger was trying to corral his sleepwalking doctor or daughter, but Ed was like, no, like, wait a minute, like, I think something is with her, pushing her up these stairs to make her go into this spot. So, let her go. So, everybody starts following this girl into, again, this wardrobe, and all of a sudden this time around she is to vanish, and they're trying to understand why. So Ed is asking for Brad to go and get the UV light, and so Brad runs to Drew to get the UV light, so to give to Ed. So Ed is looking and trying to track uh, where this girl had went to, because eventually also Drew like showed one of the girls like the UV light, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's cool." As if Drew was trying to win one of these girls over, I guess to maybe get a date or something. I don't know how old this girl was compared to him, but I guess like, hey, look what I could do, something cool, right? Whatever. Uh, so so Ed is to go and UV light this room to find out that this girl had gone through the wardrobe, and there is some hidden compartment, and there bizarrely is a hole in this wall. And so Ed pokes his hole into this wall like immediately, and I'm like, wait a minute, I wouldn't just be poking my head into any wall. Like, if anything, like, you don't know, rats, gremlins, goblins could be in this hole, but whatever. So, so Ed just pokes his head into this wall, and the girl is to be right there. And so they have, of course, like, they take this girl and try to get her back into bed. And so now Lorraine is going into this hole and wants the little the little Jack in the Box like toy to prop back where where it evidently has a like certain spot for it. And so here is the crazy part, which I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared, but so Lorraine just starts like getting a like weak piece of wood, and then all of a sudden she starts falling through this entire home. And so like Ed is now like, Lorraine, Lorraine, where are you? Like he's just like crazily running around this house trying to figure out where like Lorraine had fell. And so Lorraine is now down into this like back into the basement, and I think this is the spot where she is to have this toy with her, and eventually she is to see the mother with, or no, wait. I think she is to see the hanging person kind of just hanging in this basement bizarrely, like going this back and forth motion. Eventually, Lorraine is to also see in this basement, eventually the mother, like the spirit of the mother, like killing her child. And like I think that all goes hand in hand because eventually the woman like has the little Jack in the Box toy, and like is seeing things. So, but anyways, so also Ed and Lorraine's daughter is also getting haunted as well because I think her name is Judy. I'm not going out of my way to know every single person's name, but Ed and Lorraine's daughter is to be at home, and she is to be woken up by her like also getting grabbed. And so Judy is to go throughout the home and like start to like try to figure out where her parents are, because eventually she's assuming maybe they're home but they're not. And so Lorraine, Judy is to go into this room that has this rocking chair, and all of a sudden, this rocking chair has a ghost within it that has the Annabelle doll, and all of a sudden, the Annabelle doll is like adjusting its head and looking right at this girl, and so now Judy is freaking out, like screaming and yelling for her nana because evidently her nana is watching over her. Like Lorraine eventually was to go out into the lake part or the pond part of this movie to see the like some kind of thing of her like daughter being dragged through the lake. And so Lorraine called her mother and to see if her daughter was okay, and her daughter was okay. And so Lorraine like freaked out for nothing. It was just some kind of threat or some kind of warning. But anyway, so Judy is like freaking out, and her nana is trying to get through the door. And so eventually, perfect timing, both Lorraine and Ed are to make their way home, and so Ed is to make and open this door and retrieve their daughter. And so uh, Ed is asking, like, hey, what happened? And so their daughter is to explain what happened. Ed is to look for the Annabelle doll. The Annabelle doll is back where it should be. And so they're like, well, I guess this is just over. Like, so let me pause for a second. Let me get a reset. So again, like, I want to apologize. This movie is not going to be in order. This movie is, for me, probably review-wise, going to be all over the place. So, again, like, I'm kind of connecting things of, like, I'm trying to connect things together, but I'm not going to do it in the order of the movie. I'm just not. Because there's a lot of crap that happens in this film. But so back with Lorraine, where she's down in the basement, and eventually she's going to make her way back to her husband to tell him about the stuff that she had seen, the hard times she had had. So eventually, because of all of these late nights, Carol is to be exhausted, and she just really wants to just rest for one day. And Ed is like, well, hey, go ahead and have that rest. If anything, me and Lorraine will just take care of the kids. Like, if anything, like, we'll kind of babysit them. Like, you guys need to just go about your days, because I think Roger just went off to work. So Carol is to go to sleep, and while she is to be sleeping, eventually she is to get much more bruises, and eventually have a ghost just hop inside her bate. So all of a sudden, Carol is to wake up and barf into a toilet, and Lorraine is to just kind of feel something coming from Carol's room. So Lorraine is to like run to the room to try to see, like, hey, Carol, are you okay? Carol is just getting sick, and so Lorraine is going through the other room to just kind of like see if Carol's okay. Carol gets out of the walks out of the door, and she's like, you know what? I think I'm just fine. Like, I just feel like I caught something, or I'm just sick. But Lorraine can't like feel any like bad juju or anything from Carol, so like Lorraine just lets it go. So eventually, we just push on to again have both Ed and Lorraine eventually getting evidence to this priest, because what ends up happening is that eventually there is a point when one of the girls is to be dragged by her hair through this entire living room. Like, she's to be like just consistently dragged around through this living room in one spot. And I think Drew is to be like filming this whole thing. And so what ends up happening is they have to cut this girl's hair to let this ghost like stop dragging her throughout this room. And so really they say, yeah, like that's definite evidence. And so Ed and Lorraine finally take this to a priest. The priest is like, okay, well, I have to run this up the flagpole. Like we'll see, if we're gonna be able to do this whole exorcism, this house or not. I don't know. We'll figure things out. So while the priest is kind of getting the thumbs up from whoever from up top, eventually Carol is starting to get in worse and worse condition to uh eventually Carol is, because this whole family had decided to go into a hotel, like completely just avoiding this whole home whatsoever. And Carol is to take her kids to her home, drive her kids to her home to come back to this house to kill her kids in this home. And so the kids are to call their father, I guess, in the middle of the night to let him know what's going on. And so Roger is to just tell, like, Ed and Lorraine, it's like, dude, something's going on with my wife. Like, call everybody, call Drew, call Brad, call everyone. Like, something's going on with my wife. So everyone is to run in as fast as they can to get to this house to eventually prevent Carol from almost stabbing and or killing her her family. So everyone is to kind of we have Brad who like shoots this door to get into this home. And so eventually they see like Carol almost killing her daughters. So they like grab her and try to get her out of this house to try to get to the quickest priest so that way they can perform an exorcism. But Carol can't leave this house. The more they try to have her leave this house, the more heavily bruised and the more heavily damaged that Carol gets. So they have to leave Carol in the house and get the kids out of the house. And so Carol is going down into the basement, and like they're tying her up, they're putting a sheet over her, they're like wrestling her down and all kinds of things. And so they're like, dude, we need to do an exorcism right here and now. So Ed is to decide, okay, well, I'm going to do the exorcism. And Roger's like, wait a minute, like, you're not ordained. Like, I want actual priests. And Ed is like, dude, I'm like as ordained as it's gonna get. And so Ed does have a cross. It seems like he seems legit, so we're just going to take his word for it. So Ed is to, of course, start reading scriptures. Like there's at points where he shows that he has some like holy water and crosses and all kinds of things. So Ed is to start reading scriptures and trying to get this thing out of this woman. Eventually, there's like furniture that's flying. A ton of birds are hitting this house. Drew is flipping out by seeing all these birds hitting these windows and breaking this house. It's freaking pandemonium out there. So eventually, one of the girls is in the car, and like trees or birds are breaking into the freaking the car. I don't know why. They just want to smack into something. I don't get why. But anyways, so pandemonium is going outside with all these birds smacking consistently into this home. Like they just need to just are magnetized bizarrely to this home and smack into it bizarrely. It's weird. So eventually, Ed is trying to consistently, like, the power of Christ compels you to be gone from this woman. And so eventually, like, Carol is to, like, rip a piece of the sheet to where we're just like seeing her like demon face. And eventually Carol is eventually like breaking out of her chair, and like furniture is flying around and craziness is happening to the point of almost Carol trying to like burrow her way to get to her children. But eventually they find Carol within this house, and they like stop her, and they like Ed tries to force this demon out. And like Roger is trying to like motivate Carol to like come back to them. And Lorraine is reminding Carol about that beautiful moment that they had in the beach, because Lorraine had touched one of these photos and mentioned to Carol, "Oh wow, that was a really nice moment at the beach." And Carol was like, "How did you know that we were at the beach?" And Carol is like, "Well, I just touch things and I just have these like feelings that like I get wafted of." And so Carol does start talking about that moment when they were at that beach. And so Lorraine is like, "Oh wow, like I can see how that was a really nice day for you." So Lorraine is reminding Carol, touching her head, like we see here, about that day, about that moment that is to keep Carol for, for forcing this demon out. And it seems like that works. It seems like this girl eventually is to barf up this demon and exercise this woman good enough to where it cleans this house, to where everybody's like, "Oh my god, like thank god, like this house seems to be like everything is done, everything is okay." Because Ed and Lorraine ask these both Carol and Roger, like, "Well, hey, like can you like actually afford to move out of here?" And Roger's like, "Dude, I have all kinds of money, just like it's a house of cards, like if like if we can't live in this home, because I've strapped everything into this home. And there's also just so many repairs that I've had to do in this home, and so like there's just like I'm stuck in here, like I'm stuck in this home." So eventually like there's also this moment where Ed goes and fixes their Chevy, but that's moot point. Roger mentioned something about a carburetor, and Ed tries to help him out fix his car to try to, I guess, sell it. So, but anyways, so Carol is to get this demon out of her. It seems that everything is okay, and eventually, after they get this whole thing done, really it's just the hugging moment of this family, and they're all hugging together, and it's all this emotional moment where everybody's like, "Yeah, like we won," and everybody's like nodding at people that are like thanking one another in some kind of nodding motion. So uh, after this, they are to go and have the one trinket back into like their like trophy case of possessed items. And so they go and they take this little Jack in the Box like toy and put it in their collection. And so all of a sudden the tail end of this movie, they have a Jack in the Box thing like do this little like wind up thing again, and you're kind of expecting there to be some last jump scarish thing, but there isn't. That's what I was kind of expecting. But yeah, so really I thought this was like a like okay enough movie. Really I would just say that uh like eventually like you have to just kind of like invest in this movie right out of the gate, because it could be boring for some people. But with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here so I can just call it a day. But anyways, goodbye everybody. Bye everybody.